Hi, this is Lippy. I'm a shamanic healer, and this video kicks off a new series of videos that I am going to be creating about a concept known as shamanic journeying. Now, what is shamanic journeying is something we're going to talk about in just a few minutes. But this new series of videos is going to are going to cover some very personal journeys, shamanic journeys that I have taken on my path, which I wanted to share with you. And the first journey that I'm going to share with you today is my journey with the fear of abandonment and the concept of death. Now, before we go further, it's important to explain a little bit about what shamanic journeying is. So I'm going to be making a separate video on shamanic journeys for you to have more details about this concept. But quickly, for now, in the in the shamanic universe, we believe that there are two realities. So there is ordinary reality, that is the reality that most of us live in on a day-to-day basis, and then there is an invisible reality which we call non-ordinary reality. Now, in very simple terms, the technical concept of shamanic journeying is your soul piece, a piece of your essence, actually leaving your body during at a sort of a heightened experience or a heightened psychic state, and journeying to non-ordinary reality. And the purpose of the journeys normally are to get answers or gain an understanding of hidden forces that govern our lives, and also guidance about how to maneuver our journey in this reality, that is the ordinary reality. Now, the journey that I'm about to describe to you today partially does not fit the technical concept of shamanic journeying, because some of it was done in non-ordinary reality and some of it were a series of experiences that I had very much in ordinary reality. But even though it may not be technically precise, to me it makes both journeys count to me as shamanic journeys, ordinary and non-ordinary, because to my understanding, a non-ordinary journey is incomplete if we are not able to use that understanding and use that knowledge in ordinary reality, and also for us to enter non-ordinary reality with curiosity, with questions about our existence. We need to have had certain experiences in ordinary reality that pique our curiosity, that pique our interest. So this particular journey has been a lifetime journey for me, and as I said, it is connected to my fear of abandonment, which I found out during the journey is actually the fear of death. And it's ironic that today I decide to make this video here. When I got here, believe it or not, what is behind me is a small temple, and right next to that, what is under construction is a this funeral spot where most Hindus, when they burn the body, they usually do it in a place like this. And it's so ironic that I get this feeling to come here today and shoot this video here today, and I didn't realize it till I got here. And I'm like, oh my god, this is just a crazy coincidence, because I'm talking about the fear of abandonment, which turns out to be the fear of death, and I'm right here, right, shooting this video in what we would call in Hindi a Shamshan Ghat, where you would burn the bodies. It's very, very strange. But anyway, coming back to what I was saying, I, growing up with a certain amount of dysfunction and growing up in a situation where I was abandoned a lot, developed a huge fear of abandonment over the span of my life. And it was so bad for me that relationships were very, very difficult. I was constantly terrified of being rejected, of being abandoned, and it really sort of affected my life in a very deep and painful way. I have to say, a very painful way. And I was, being the curious minded person that I am, very fascinated with the subject of abandonment altogether. Like, what is it that causes fear of abandonment? Do we all have fear of abandonment? And how do you overcome that fear? So, the journey that I took on this partially came from journeys I took in ordinary reality, from having these questions. And then that caused me to enter non ordinary reality for the ultimate experience that I had with the fear of abandonment. And the questions, the first question that I had was, does everyone have a fear of abandonment? And the answer is yes, because the fear of abandonment is really the fear of death, and it is hardwired into us. So if we did not have the fear of death, we would probably not be alive, because in an ironic kind of way, the fear of death keeps us alive. It stops us, it prevents us from damaging ourselves or harming ourselves to the extent that we would not exist anymore. So, if the fear of abandonment is such a common thing, why do psychologists and all this self help literature talk about overcoming your fear of abandonment? And is there such a thing? Can you actually overcome this fear of abandonment? And I did a lot of ordinary journeying into this concept by means of reading, by means of observation of my own experience and experience with clients and things like that. And what I realize is that it's not about not having a fear of abandonment, which is the fear of death, which is hardwired into all of us. It's about how it's handled. So if you in your childhood were not trained psychologically to handle that fear of abandonment or the fear of death, it would then become very, very excessive and very, very prominent in your life and run your life in some very destructive ways, which is what happened with me. But that is that can be handled depending on how you bring up a child, how you bring up a person. So a very important part of child rearing is soothing your child and helping them to minimize and to learn how to handle that innate fear of abandonment, or innate fear of death. Now, the other question that kept haunting me was like, okay, so what? I mean, can you overcome this? Like, will there be a day when I stop fearing abandonment? Will there be a day when I stop fearing death? Is that ever going to happen? And it's interesting because many seekers on the path to a conventional spiritual enlightenment, when I looked at or read about them, or had gained some expertise on their life journeys, almost every spiritual master, almost every guru that I read about or encountered, had at some stage had some encounter with death, and it was an initiation. So so either they had an experience where they died and they came back, or they had to face their fear of death, or some kind of an initiation like this, and it was a spiritual initiation into this life. But what I did not understand was they all came back saying that, now I don't fear death anymore. And maybe they don't, but I had a slightly different experience, because I also had an encounter with death in a very interesting way, which I will share with you in a few minutes. But it did not stop me from fearing death. I had a slightly different experience. I embraced the concept. Now, so I still have a fear of abandonment, I still have a fear of death, but I have learned in my journey how to hold both that fear and also hold a deep passion and a deep love for life. And that happened when, a couple of years ago, when I started my shamanic training, I had a very interesting experience that I did not understand at the time. And the experience was, we were asked to do a shamanic journey into our hearts. So we were asked to go and look into our hearts and see who was the guardian spirit of our heart and speak to the spirit. So that was one of the shamanic journeys we did. And when I went on a heart journey, I saw something or someone that looked like an angel but it had a dark energy, and the face was really dark. So it had those angel wings and that whole persona, but the face was really dark and the energy was dark. And I did not understand what I was seeing, and it kind of frightened me a little bit, to be honest with you. And I was supposed to ask questions to the spirit, but I was so taken aback by the look and the feel of the spirit that all I managed to ask is, "What is your name?" That's all I managed to ask. And the answer that came back to me was Archangel Israel. I had no. I'm not one of those people who's into angel readings, angel guidance, angel numbers. I actually know very little about angels, so I had no idea who is Archangel Israel. And I came out of the journey, and there were apparently some other people in the training who said that they were angel card readers and angel guidance counselors and things like that. So I asked them, I said, does anyone know here who is Archangel Israel? Because that's who I saw on my journey. And nobody answered. So I went and looked it up, and well, Archangel Israel is the angel of death. And I was not surprised because, ironically, for almost 6 or 7 years preceding that training, I had been losing close loved ones on a massive basis. Like, I had lost so many people to death, and it was a very, very terrifying and traumatic experience for me. So I wasn't surprised when I saw this guardian spirit there, because obviously I had lost so many people. So initially I thought it was about maybe the people that I had lost trying to communicate with me, but I didn't give it more energy than that. I just let it go. A couple of years later, I was still, this loss continued, so I kept facing huge losses of all kinds. I was losing people to death. I lost all my savings. I lost the home that I lived in. I slowly my life was turning into one whole series of one loss after the other, one loss after. I'd barely recovered from one loss, and there'd be the other one, and the next one, and the next one, and it was just going insane. That whole energy was going insane. And I remember one day I was really, really down, from all everything that had been happening, and I came across this ad on FB where somebody wanted, not me, wanted to foster, or needed a foster for a really young kitten. And for some strange reason, I felt really attracted to foster that kitten. And I get this kitten to come home. She was really frail, very ill. And they told me she was ill and that she was going to need special care. And I said, that's fine. I will do everything I can. And I took her in, and I had a terrible feeling that the kitten wasn't going to last the night. I could sense it. So I started speaking to the spirit, or the soul of the kitten, and I said, like, can you hang around just a little bit, because I have faced so much loss and so much death, and the last thing I need is to have you die here like this with me now. And can you hold on? And this soul of the kitten was not very keen on hanging around. So in spite of my best efforts, I woke up in the morning and I looked into the basket where the kitten was, and she was gone. And I picked up this kitten in my hand, and she was hard. The rigor mortis had set in, and I started screaming. I went absolutely hysterical. It's like that was the last straw on the camel's back. I remember this experience, and I was hysterical for hours. I just did not understand why this was happening to me, and why the universe was putting me through such excruciating pain and loss. And I, of course, I called the the people who had sent the kitten to me to foster, and I said, I'm so sorry, but I tried my best, but she's gone. And they said they understood, because they weren't expecting her to live either, and they said they would come and collect the kitty, and they'd do a funeral. So I had this dead body of the kitten also lying around my house, and suddenly I felt complete terror. Like, I could not go near the basket. I was so terrified of the basket, I was actually shaking. And I basically was having a full blown panic attack, hysterical fits, fear. I was in a bad shape. And this went on for a couple of hours till it got so bad that I was actually lying on the floor of my house, looking up at the ceiling, wondering whether I had lost it, whether I had totally gone nuts. And suddenly, in all that madness and all that craziness, it struck me what was happening, what all those losses had been about. And I was like, oh my God, I'm being put through a spiritual initiation myself, because I'm being made to face my fear of death. It's right here. It's like I've been running away from it. I've been overcoming my losses and moving on, but it's not stopping. And I think it's the universe is trying to make me face that fear as a means to for me to take a leap of consciousness. And the minute I realized that, the next thing that came to me is I needed to journey back to Archangel Israel, to the spirit of death, and understand its message, because all those years ago I had just asked the name of this guardian spirit. I didn't know what the message was, and what came to me was I had been avoiding that message. So I journeyed, and that's when I did the non-ordinary journey on this subject of fear of abandonment, fear of death. And I spoke to the spirit. And so it's a long story, and that it is going to take up a whole lot of video space that we don't have. But basically, the message was that this was an initiation for me, and that by embracing my fear of death, embracing my fear of abandonment, I could also use that energy to propel myself to live a happier life and to live a more meaningful life. Because as we say in some shamanic literature, we say that, always remember that your best friend, which is death, is just behind the shoulder, and you never know when it can come. So although I never overcame my fear of abandonment or fear of death, and you're not supposed to, from what I learned, you're not supposed to. It's not something you overcome, it's something you embrace. It led me to living my life with more zest. It led me to my next path and to my spiritual initiation. So this was my journey, which I wanted to share with you. And there's going to be a whole series of videos that I'm going to be making on different journeys that I have taken. I hope this was helpful or resonated with you or gave you some kind of an insight into maybe a similar experience that you've had. I thank you very much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you and goodbye.